Hey, Reverend Steele, how you doing today?
Hi, pleasant. Good afternoon to you, Chris. I think it's afternoon my time here in Barbados. What time is it over there in the Penn State?
Oh, it is afternoon today. Yes, it's so we're at least yeah, we can say good afternoon. This is wonderful, folks. I am so stoked to have somebody from Barbados. Not only just somebody, but Reverend Michael Steele from Barbados on the show today. As you know from watching Expert Showcase, we've had a lot of incredible experts around the topic of marriage, divorce, and better relationships. And Michael, Reverend Steele is just another one in the long line. He is about to lay down some epic knowledge on you. So I hope you're ready. So get some water or something and just hunker down because you got to listen to what Reverend Steele has to. If Reverend Steele's got his water, you've got to listen to what Reverend Steele has to say. So, as we do every episode for Expert Showcase, I'm going to go ahead and start off, and we're going to talk to Reverend Steele about his hero's journey. Now, for those of you just tuning in and are used to a typical hero's journey, we've kind of condensed it. We talk about the beginning, the turnaround, and the aftermath. The beginning being whatever happened before the turnaround, before that led to that deep dark place or that turning point. Then we got the turning point and what happened all around there. And then we get into the aftermath and the success and the great things that are happening today. So, Reverend Steele, before we get into each point individually, give our folks a quick overview of your journey.
Well, my journey was um, I I've taken a lot of years to get to this place of being in a position where I can come and talk about it. You can understand that marriage and divorce is very emotional, and it can be very traumatic in some instances. But my journey began because I came up as a young man from a single parent raised just with my mom, and I always had a passion to have a family. Because I was raised without a dad, I always wanted to be in a position where I can give a child what I never had. And as a Christian, the only way to do that would be through marriage. And I got married at a young age in my 20s, early 20s, because it's one of those things where you think everybody else is getting married, and what about you? And I didn't want to go into the dating stuff because well, as a Christian, I kept myself. I was not sexually active, because I was one of those very, I followed the doctrine, I followed the guidelines, and I wanted to make sure I did it the correct way. So long story short, before we get into all the details, I got married on the drop of a hat. I didn't do a lot of the counseling. I didn't go through all the necessary things, and that went pear shaped. And then when that went pear shaped, I was separated for a number of years, and I left Barbados, went to England, and then I got divorced because I still wanted to have a family, but couldn't have a family without a wife. And so I remarried again to a much younger person, and that again, you look in the first mistake you made and you think, okay, I'll try to do it this way that might work better, and I'll make sure I put this in place and that in place. You kind of you want to put everything in their perspective, and
Yeah.
when that happened with it was a younger person, it was a white person, cultural change as well, cultural dynamics, and that went pear-shaped as well, and the person, they went back to where they came from. That was a bitter, a very very bitter um, journey for me. And then I was still at that place where I just wanted to totally give up, because first it started and it didn't go the way you planned, and then you tried again, and it didn't go the way you planned. But in the
Yeah.
back of my mind was the lack of the fact that I did not fulfill what I want to fulfill, which is I want a family. and
Yeah.
and I'm not going to go out there and make the mistake that my family made by having these kids outside of wedlock. And I get a lot of stick for that, but I still wanted to have a family that I know I'm going to raise, I'm going to be dear.
Yeah.
And I got involved with somebody that had kids because I thought that, okay, that's somebody that's stable, they're more serious, more committed. And that went pear-shaped. She went her way after the acknowledge of how serious I am as a reverend and what I stand for, and
Yeah.
then the children. We have issues that are so challenging. And then my final thing happened. My dad died from cancer, and a person who after my last marriage failed, a person who became my good friend, and my dad liked her a lot. And my dad asked her a strange question. She wasn't even my girlfriend or something. My dad just asked her, unbeknown to me, if she would give me a kid, because my dad knew that all my heart I just wanted to have a family. He knew me. Um, and she told my dad, yes, I didn't know this. But when my dad succumbed to his cancer, and he died in England, I went up, buried my dad, and I came back, and I said, I'm going to try one last time, and I'm going to do it the way I wanted to do it, which is to get married. And I did.
Yeah.
And I have a son now. So that's a little bit of a snapshot
So,
of the journey for you right there. I think
yeah.
that does.
Yes, that's great. So, and I say it's great because it's interesting. You had a lot of challenges. You did what every one of us does. We make decisions that sometimes are spontaneous and other times are more thought out. And if they're the right decisions, then they last. If they're not, then we have to change. You went through a very dark time. Losing a parent. I've been there. I know how I know how I felt. I can only imagine how you felt. The amazing thing is that your parent gave you your dad gave you the greatest. I'll say the greatest gift in the world, which was to try and take care of you after he was gone, and it led to a loving and great relationship. So that is epic. Let's dig into each piece a little bit because what our audience really loves to do is loves to identify with our guest and say, "Oh, I can see that I might be going through something like that right now." So, you'll be helping our audience hopefully avoid, maybe some of the pitfalls. So let's start off during the beginning phase. With having Now, remember, we only have about an hour today, and each of these segments are short. So, with having three marriages, I don't know. I was in one myself. I guess we could talk for 3 or 4 hours on each marriage, but we'll hit the high points. So first question to throw out to you. If I heard you right, you kind of got married you kind of got married without I don't want to say without thinking because you did think, but it was kind of it sounded like it was a little bit rushed. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it was. I was in the church. I came up in the church, and as a young man, I was in my 20s. I got saved when I was 11, 12 years old, and then I kept on in the church, and I joined the church when I got seriously committed when I was about 16, 17 years old, seriously to the core committed.
Okay.
And all the time in church, you see the younger guys getting married, and then they have their kids, and you look at yourself, and you're out there ministering, you're out there helping, you're out there caring, and you live alone, because I lived on my own as well after I was 19, 20 years old. And you get to the place of that loneliness, that void. And I'm not one who really wanted to go through relationships, as in girlfriend, boyfriend, where you kind of, I use the term, I don't want to be taster tested, a lot of
Yeah, I love that. I don't want to be taste tested. That is, I love that, man. That's
in the
epic.
in the church. One of the things that I was seeing is a lot of young men in the church, and the young girls, and they get involved, and they become sexually active, and then they don't want that person, and then they're sexually active with somebody else, and they don't want that person, and it gets to a place where they lose themselves, they lose their focus. And I think marriage for them becomes just to have a sexual relationship. It's not something about family. And for me, that was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to have a family, and that was my focus. So when I got my first opportunity to get married, I met this wonderful person in the church. I didn't get to know them so much. I knew about their love for God and their passion and all that good stuff, but I didn't take the time to develop a relationship, a bond, and I didn't do the counseling. So I
So,
think
so
that's it.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. Pardon me for interrupting, but let me ask you a question because I think you just said a real key point. The fact that you didn't take the time. I believe in love at first sight. And granted, maybe I'm not the best because my ex-wife and I fell in love at first sight, and now we're divorced. But we actually did fall in love, and I guess I wonder from a because I've known a lot of people in very strong faith-based relationships. I wonder, do you feel that you went so quickly because it was a faith-based relationship, so you had everything else in common, and it wasn't that you fell deep in love, or do you believe you at that point had fallen in love with her, and everything else was just it was, I'll say, nice because she was religious and part of the church and everything.
Well, let me pull the wisdom of all four of my relationships into this answer, because if I had answered back then, I might answer you in youthful ignorance. Youthful ignorance meaning that you feel the emotion, you feel the passion, and people telling you no, this is not a good idea because they're older, and you never see the little bullet points that they see. So I personally know, I don't believe, I know that you can go on a trip and meet somebody right there and marry that person and spend the rest of your life with them and no problems, no troubles. I know that because I now understand some different dynamics of the associations, the neuro associations, the spiritual associations, and the physical associations, or should you use the word attractions. So I do believe that you can meet somebody immediately, fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, you get married, you have a family, and nothing never happens. I believe that 100%. Um, but when I use the term I didn't take enough time, I'm speaking from the fact that I was much younger, and I didn't have a lot of experience in some of the dynamics that are necessary for a relationship to be healthy. For example,
Ah,
quarreling and arguing is extremely healthy. As a matter of fact, if you have a relationship where there's no quarreling and there's no arguing and there's no debate, there's something lacking.
yeah.
And there's a facade that with time, the possibility of something that would trigger a negative response or an immediate I'm done with this would shock a person because they never realized that what was missing is that intricate friction that a relationship needs to keep it dirty, clean, up, down, going, coming, happy, sad. Those emotions are necessary for a healthy relationship, and that's what I believe.
And I think to further that thought, would you agree that if that happens early on, you end up learning how to deal with the friction so that when the major things happen, you can deal with it better. Whereas if you have no friction and all of a sudden something really bad happens, you've never learned how to deal with it with your partner. You just have, it is what it is, and it ends up it ends up being something that'll tend to destroy a marriage much quicker than if you learned how to deal with it. Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Well, I personally, if a couple tells me they want to get married and they're interested in getting married, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't I base this on my experiences and the wisdom that I've attained, and forgive me for others who think differently. But if a person wants to get married and they're all butterflies and everything is wonderful, their parents love them, they love their parents, and they're happy, they don't quarrel, they don't argue. As far as I'm concerned, they're not candidates for marriage, personally. But if somebody comes now and they tell me, man, I'm always quarreling with her. She gets under my skin. She gets me so annoyed and she gets me so edgy. I don't even know. She's from another planet and I'm from, if somebody tells me that, I'm saying, you know what, you guys are ready to get married. And let me explain what I'm saying when I say that. I don't want you to kind of take it to an extreme. But what I'm trying to say is that you're engaging.
Yep.
You're being real. The person is not ashamed to let you know they're angry. They're not trying to keep you, so they pretend not to be angry when they are and just grit their teeth. You see them angry. They feel comfortable to be themselves, and I think that that's one of the healthy things for a relationship, when individuals are comfortable with themselves and they conflict and they clash, but it's not about us separating or going our ways. It's about us learning to deal with the dynamics that are a part of this relationship.
Exactly, and that's an epic point, and it's so. I think it really, for me, and I know it's been a very very brief conversation about, about the three, the beginning piece, but it sounds like for me that was one of your big learnings. And folks, as you're going to be able to tell from this entire episode, you're going to want to get in contact with with Reverend Sal. So I'm gonna give you a doctorate in something. I'll give you an honorary doctorate in just in the crap of life or something like that. But but no, in all seriousness, you're gonna want to know that you're gonna want to get in touch with Reverend Steele because he's been there. And for my money, the people you want to learn from, the people who have actually been there in the school of hard knocks, and the people who have made their mistakes and are willing to talk about it and admit it. So what I can really tell from our brief conversation on this is one of the big things that you learned was the fact that you did have it was rainbows, and as the old song goes, rainbows and roses and whiskers on kittens, and all the other stuff. These are a few of my favorite things. All the other fun, rainbows, unicorns, all the other fun stuff. And what in the end you realized is that while you don't want to marry somebody you hate, you have to marry somebody that you can interact with and is willing to have that give and take with you. So, folks, if you're listening to this and you're questioning on who you want to marry, if it is all rainbows, see if you can interact with that person. Don't try to start a fight, but put yourself in a situation where you want to interact with that person and see how it goes. Because you could find you've got somebody there that you just don't want to be with because they don't interact with you the same way, right, Reverend Steele?
Yeah, and also you said don't pick a fight, but personally, I advise people pick a fight, and deliberately so. I'm sorry, I make no apologies for saying it that way. Pick a fight, and when I say pick a fight, kind of get under their skin, because you see, a serial killer can be your best friend and so quiet and so nice, and you think, wow, this person is just an angel from heaven, man, and you don't realize that they're suppressing a lot of
Yeah.
anger. They're suppressing a lot of hatred, and life is full of triggers that come at unusual times. And if you have a courtship that does not trigger that person's anger buttons or that person's frustrated buttons, I promise you that when you get into a marriage, there's some dynamics that we're going to talk about down the road. But when you get married, some realities are going to click in. The realities of you belong to me. And we don't like to say that, but that is a reality that changes dynamics.
Yeah.
It changes person's behavior, their attitude, their concept, the way they look at life, the way they look at things. And because of those dynamics, if you get that person angered when you belong to them, you'll see a different side that
Yeah.
you might be shocked about. And that's a reality. That's not, you ain't gonna get that in no textbook. You get that from somebody who's been there, seen it happen over and over again, and then they understand that those are just the dynamics of human existence and the dynamics of kind of an individual being themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so to kind of to I'll say move on to the turning point, because I think there's so much more about the beginning phase and so much more you learned. We're going to cover, I know, some of that later on Expert Focus. For the rest of it, we'll have to figure out how to do more videos, that sort of thing, because the message needs to get out. And if you're watching this video, well, you obviously are if you heard me just ask you the question. You need to get in touch with Reverend Steele and see what he's got to offer in his programs, and just get to know him, because it's definitely going to be a benefit to you. So let's move into the turning point. So the turning point, it sounds like to me, came maybe when your dad died, or did it come at a different time?
Well, I think that and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I don't speak with on this subject with any great pride or joy. I don't. I and I want to put a disclaimer that's very important here. Persons need to be at the place of recognizing that I don't support divorce. I'm not one for divorce. It sounds wow. How could you be not for divorce when this has happened? But the dynamics that took place caused that to happen. But the turning point for me came at the end of every relationship. There's a turning point. Every time of separation, you have to come to a turning point where you say, you know what, I got to get up and dust myself off and go again, because I've not accomplished what I set out to accomplish. I want to have a family, and that's a turning point. And each time it goes a pear shape, you have to get to a place of another turning point, and that's sad. From my story, but the reality is that there was no one turning point, because there were four different marriages. You get what I'm saying?
I get what
But
you're saying. Let me ask you a quick question, and let me know for a second. I want to ask you a question because I think that thought deserves to be explored just a little bit more. At the beginning, I think I heard you say that even from the start, you wanted a family. Now, just a quick yes or no. That was true,
that's
correct?
correct. That's correct.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that, because you also brought up the family again, would it be fair to say that at each of these turning points, what happened is you, for at least a moment, got recommitted to having a family and recommitted to what your original goal was, and then whether it got off track or not, I'm not sure, but is that kind of what happened where you're like, okay, I was committed to this goal, it didn't happen. Now I have to get recommitted to this thing. Is that kind of what was
Yeah,
going on?
I think you're jumping the gun here with my
Okay. I think we're really connecting at this point.
you're jumping the gun. What one of the and we'll get into the details of the turning point, the critical turning point. We'll get into the details of that. But one of the major details for this final turning point was my dad passing away, and my dad loved the person I'm married to now, and she absolutely loved my dad, and I never had a father. I've not spent 40 days with my dad. I've met him when I was 28 years old, and that took a toll on me, being raised with the stepfathers and
Yeah.
seeing family turmoils and stuff. But when my dad approved of my now wife, and then he died, my heart said there's nobody else for my father to approve. I will never have my father's approval again. I will never have the joy of my father, knowing that, hey, there's a special person that is there with my son, and I know she's going to take care of my son. I know she's going to treat my son good. Um, I will never have that. And sometimes in life, I think we need a solid purpose for why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Why are we committed here? And my solid purpose was not just my dad, but it was also the fact that this person found me when I was at the bottom of my ladder, at the bottom of my line. I gave up. I was way down,
Yeah.
and they see past that, and I was kind of wowed because in my previous relationships, I was up, I was rolling, I had stuff going on. I was living in the UK, I lived in the States, I was in Barbados, so but now here's somebody when I look like nothing, I have nothing to offer, and other than I'm a human being with a passion for a family. That's all I had, really. And I wanted to treat somebody special, and I have not given up on that. So the turning point for me came when I realized, wow, this person has everything different than what I was attracted to. And then the other thing is that I was not whoopsie do over head over heels about the person either. That's another thing. So for me, it was like, wow, this isn't where I would be if I was running around making my choices, because my eyes see things the different way. But
Right.
now I'm looking with mature eyes, responsible eyes, and committed eyes, and eyes that realize you're getting older, you're not getting younger.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's funny because it sounds so I'll say procedural, but I can tell just from prepping the show and just from looking in your eyes and everything that that you do love your wife, and that's the most important. Look at the smile, everybody. Look at the smile. I'm looking around at the audience. So look at the smile here. But that becomes the important thing. I think when people can love us when we are at rock bottom and we're basically have quote unquote are buck naked and don't have two nickels to rub together. That's the toughest time to love us. It's easy to love people when they're successful. It's easy to love people when they're making money. It's easy to love people when they're adored by everybody else. But it's tough to love them when they're down and when you see all the bad stuff about them. And if they can, then it's somebody that, even if it doesn't fit, in my opinion, even if it's somebody that doesn't fit into our model of who we thought we'd end up with, we ought to at least look at them because
I,
we might be looking in the wrong direction.
yeah, I think one of the high accolades I want to give to my wife and all those women out there who see a man who looks like nothing. I think a wife. You see, I'm going to go into the concept of a wife and a woman because they're two different things. Every
Yeah.
wife is a woman, but every woman is not a wife. But we'll deal with that another time. But a wife is a person who looks at an individual who has nothing to offer or nothing and sees that she can cause him by her contribution to his life to become something. But a husband also is a man, I believe, that looks at a woman and he doesn't see what she has or what she is able to give to him, but he sees what he can give to her and bring out of her because of his association with her. And when two individuals look at each other and says, "Don't worry, bud, I got your back. Don't worry, I'm gonna be here with you. I'm rolling with you." You get an appreciation for enjoying the victories that you have, as opposed to you celebrate what you already have there, so there's no great victory. But when you earn it together, when you expend energy and planning and strategy to make it happen together, that's awesome. That's epic.
Yeah.
That's your
That
word.
is
That's epic.
that is epic, and to kind of further that thought and kind of roll up on the turning point before we get to the aftermath. I look at it very similar, and say that when two people come together and create and their union or their marriage or their friendship or what have you is greater than the sum of its parts, then that's what makes it special. It's kind of like it's not necessarily that you're completing each other, but you're actually creating a whole new, a whole new being, so to speak, that is greater than the sum of
That's right.
the parts. So, epic. So we got to the turning point, and the turning point, it's similar, yet different from everybody else's. Meaning, it got to a point where you realized that you didn't have opportunities to do. I'm going to kind of generalize it, not to diminish it, but to put it in different terms for some of our audience, so that if they're going through a different circumstance, you got to a point where you realize that you had things that you had to take advantage of because they were never going to happen. They were never going to be available again. And that's a very powerful, if it's done for the right reasons, that's a very powerful thing. So you took advantage of this. And that kind of leads us into the aftermath. And the interesting part, the aftermath is, of course, this successful time. Leading from the turning point into the aftermath, I'll say the aftermath also includes kind of when you realized that your current wife was going to be your wife, and kind of realized that, oh, this is what this is the direction you were going to go, and this is what you wanted. Um, any I'll say, without getting deep into the story, any words of wisdom from that kind of decision, that kind of way of thinking that you feel would be helpful for our audience?
Yes, I think first thing is you recognize that you're different, and and once you recognize you're different, my wife is a great teacher. My wife now, both of us together are great teachers, and because we take time to analyze the situations, and then we kind of come to a an agreement, either to disagree or to agree, but it does not come to a place where we are it is affecting our relationship. Our relationship is not on the table. Our relationship is not up for debate. Our relationship, if we're gonna stay together or not stay together, it's not up for debate. This glass of water that I have on the computer desk might be the wife saying, "Hon, you know you should put a ashtray. I mean a thing under it and don't let the water run there." And I said, "Oh man, hon, you that's a little thing." And when that's done, I'm gonna say, "Oh, boo, give me a kiss. Come here." Because it's not affecting our relationship. And one of the things that is very, very important for being able to make a decision, this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, is if she could see you naked but still love you. And that might sound a little bit deep, but what I'm trying to say is if she could see the real you, the happy
Yeah.
you, the sad you, the emotional you, the crying you, the laughing you, the angry you, the mad you, the family you, the philanthropic you, whatever the you is, if she can see the real you and say, I want to follow you. I want to go where you go. I want your friends to be my friends. I just want my life to be wrapped up in your life. And you look at her and you says, wow, I want that as well. I like her friends. I like the choice of people she has around her. I like how she treats them, and I like how they treat her. All of these are dynamics that are going to play out themselves in your marriage.
Yeah.
And it go on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
you're
was going
okay.
to say, and it can only, I always talk about transformation and the fact that I don't believe anybody changes, they only transform into what they were meant to be. So, I think that we go through these changes and people go through different times and they're different when they're children, It's like the old adage, when I was a child, I acted like a child. I spoke like a child, and now that I'm an adult, I put away my childish ways or something close to that. I believe that we have a blueprint inside of us that God, the universe, a higher power, whatever higher power that you and the audience happen to believe in, put inside of you. And I think over time you transform into that. If you're lucky and if you do the right things, you transform into that. So it sounds to me, Reverend Steele, like during the aftermath period, when after the turning point, after all this stuff happened, you learned from everything that happened before, learned that you were probably a little different than what you were, I'll say, meant to be, and you transformed. And along this transformation, you were lucky enough to be transforming and have that woman, the person that you're going to live the rest of your life with, and the person that was, going to finally fill all those buckets there, and you could go through maybe the final bits of transformation with her. Is that fair to say? Does that all make sense, or am I completely off base on this?
No, you're on base. There are a lot of dynamics that are involved there, but you definitely are on base. And there's one critical thing. There are a number of critical things, but one of the most critical things that you need to be successful going forward, and it's important, forgiveness, true forgiveness.
Yeah.
If you give your ex the right to make the decision that they made, then you learn to appreciate the foolish decisions that your current would make and give them the right, because you understand that, hey, that's just the way they are and that's just the way they feel about it, and you learn to work with that. But if you hold a anger at what your ex did or what happened in the past relationship and you never forgive and let go, what you're taking into your other relationship is hurt, resentment, and as soon as, and it will always happen, as soon as your spouse does something that reflects something similar to what that other person does, you have a restimulation, and a restimulation of emotions, of attitude, and because you haven't dealt with it in the previous relationship, it comes up again and it does the same thing to you. I think that the word karma, you hear karma, what goes around comes around. I'm going to give you something that's real, and I tell a lot of Christians that pastors that are married one time could never ever teach you this because they might not want to believe in it. But the
Right.
truth of the matter is, you just repeat the cycle until you get it right. You do not, there is nothing different about you. You don't change anything. You're the same you. And the person that you get involved with, the same thing that upset you in a previous relationship, you're gonna have it in the same relationship, and you're gonna have to face it. And until you learn to forgive and let go what the other person did to you, and then face the reality that you're looking at it again, but you now have to find a constructive way as opposed to a destructive way of dealing with it, you will be in the same rut as I found myself in. And I think the other dynamic was that my partners, they were in places where they never dealt with their other issues, and I was kind of like, I dealt with mine. I kind of had it together to some degree. I'm not claiming perfection in my other relationships, but to some degree I had, an understanding, and their discomforts and their angers, when they see it reflected in me and what I did, albeit known other than the fact that I'm a natural man, it caused problems.
Yeah, and that's so. I think that's an epic place to kind of wrap up to wrap up the hero's journey, because it applies across the board, whether it's in business or in your personal life. When you continue to you will continue to repeat cycles until you get it right, or until sometimes until you just forgive. I mean, even the lack of forgiving something could just be the trigger for you to finally get it right the next time. We can go into that so very, very deep that it could take up multiple shows. So I would just say to you this: I would say, if you find yourself in the same relationships, or if you find yourself in the same business situations over and over again, you're being asked to repeat it until you get it right. Start with
Yes.
forgiveness and start forgiving the past mistakes, and see if that at least helps a little bit, and then look to start to figure out what else could be going on. Reverend Steele, the first half of today's show has been epic and off the charts. You've got so much great information, so much great experience. I swear, like I said, we could talk forever. Folks who know me, who know how much I like to talk, I'm controlling myself because we could have 1,000 questions at this point. But we only have an hour show, and we got to get to the Experts Focus segment. Before we do, we're going to take a very, very quick break while I take my one breath an hour. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, on the flip side, we're going to have Reverend Steele back for the second half of today's Expert Showcase episode. And it's all going to be about divorce and all the other fun stuff, and he's going to help you. And this is, I shouldn't say fun stuff. I'm so amped up that this is very emotional topic. So I'm going to compose myself. We're going to take a break, and you want to stick around because you're going to be able to hear a Reverend's view on marriage and divorce. 4 wives later, he's got the experience. We're going to walk you through some things that will help you and help make your life better. So stick around, and we'll be right back.
To watch the rest of this epic episode now, click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.